Hello friends, welcome back to Strategic Management. After having a detailed discussion on environmental sustainability and business sustainability in correlation with each other, now I wish for you to move towards the factors around the business environment and strategy. Here I am referring to environment of the business, which definitely includes general environment as well. And the reason for discussing environmental sustainability before this stage was that environmental sustainability or the physical environment of a business is the most important factor nowadays. It is the largest concern, the largest levels of world's resources, policies, finances, they have been directed towards this kind of a situation. And it is, it is forecasted, it is foreseen that the businesses which would be more sensitive towards the environmental concerns would be sustaining themselves in due course of time apart from others. So this is what is foreseen. So let's see what authors talk about in terms of as far as business environment goes, and we will be starting our discussion from the general environment a business has. Here, we would be using both the texts simultaneously, but more prominently Kellett, Thompson and Strickland and Gamble, and but this we are initiating with Hitt, Ireland and Oskison, Strategic Management, Competitiveness and Globalization Concepts and Cases by Southwestern. The authors say that general environment is composed of segments that are external to the firm. Although the degree of impact varies, these environmental segments affect each industry and its firms. You see, that is what we are trying to build up here. So we will be talking about other forces as compared to or not in comparison to, but other forces alongside general physical environment as well. The challenge to the firm is to scan, monitor, forecast and assess those elements. Scan, analyze, monitor how they are actually affecting our business, because we are talking of a long term strategic pathway. Forecast how they would be affecting us in due course of time, forecasting that how environmental forces would be affecting us in due course of time, and assess those elements in each segment that are of great importance to us. So we have talked about the greatest, the most important element earlier. These efforts should result in recognition of environmental changes, trends, opportunities and threats. Here we would be referring to Porter's 5 forces model as well. Opportunities are then matched with the firm's core competencies. And earlier when we talked about that how Professor Stuart Hart says that we should be revisiting our core competencies in accordance with the need of the environment as such. So here we are on the same page when we are talking of the environmental forces. Let us see what Kellett, Thompson, Strickland and Gamble in Crafting and Executing Strategy, the Quest for Competitive Advantage say. They say that they talk about environmental forces with the perspective of macro environment as well. So they say that every company operates in a broad macro environment. It encompasses the broad environmental context in which companies' industry is situated. All the similar companies, Macro environment comprises 6 principal components, and we would be talking about that. Political factors, economic conditions in the firm's general environment, that is local, country, regional, worldwide, wherever you are operating. Socio-cultural forces, technological factors, environmental factors concerning the natural environment, which we have picked up since the beginning, and legal and regulatory conditions. You see, we would be calling these PESTLE in due course of time, P for political and then E for economic and then S for socio-cultural, T for technological and E for environmental factors and L for legal, PESTLE. Each of these components has the potential to affect the firm's more immediate industry and competitive environment, although some are likely to have more important effect than others, and this is the point of concern which we must have at this moment when we are thinking in terms of aligning our strategies with the environment. I would be talking about how environment, strategy and structure of a company, all these 3, they behave in consonance with each other in my due discussions. I would be talking about how structure of industry and structure of organization are associated with environment and strategy, where strategy directs the structure of industry and where structure directs the strategy, and where strategy usually precedes the structure of organization. That we will be talking about in due course of time, and that would be interesting for us to understand how to actually take strategic steps in due course of time in consonance with the environmental forces, so as to make our pathway smooth, because we are thinking in terms of a long term. So, let us see which of these elements become important when, in what kind of conditions, and let us see what authors talk about. Macroeconomic factors affect different industries in different ways and to different degrees, very logical. So, it is important for managers to determine which of these represent the most strategically relevant factors outside the firm's industry boundaries. Semiconductors, and we have talked about that, how India is going for that. Other technological developments, software development, how world aligned with that. Geopolitical situation, wars going on, how world is trying to align with that. Mutual canal systems, how world aligned their transportation systems with that. How they actually revisited the transport carriers, the ships which they were constituting according to the size of the canals in due course of time. Strategically relevant means important factors which have a bearing on the decisions the company ultimately makes about its long-term direction, objective, strategy and business models. For example, I am producing a product which is relevant for whole of this world. How would I be reaching to this world basically? What kind of a political situation would affect me? What kind of a transportation system would affect me, and so on, if you are talking of physical products. For example, Amazon procures products for you from whole of the world. How they are actually managing that? What kind of environmental forces are overwhelming for them in India and US on the other side, and how they are collating with each to actually go for a larger kind of a perspective. How Netflix is actually redirecting itself by creating a very logical mix of Indian taste along with whatever they are producing, because if they solely focus upon Indian films or Indian kind of software production, then probably they would be deviating from their original positioning, and they would be having Netflix India and Netflix US separately, but they are not doing that. So, they are trying to put up those things which can be adapted by the people here as well, and that definitely reduces their costs, and then they are generating some software here, the entertainment or movies or serials which are relevant only for Indian audience or Indian audience anywhere else. That is how those things, and then for producing that they have to look into Indian norms, Indian legalities, Indian compliances and so on. So, this 6 component of the macro environment are suggested this way. We have talked about that. Let us try and briefly decipher these. So, political factors include matters such as tax policy, fiscal policy, tariffs, the political climate and the strength of institutions such as the federal banking system. Some political policies affect certain types of industries more than others. If a particular government has a very specific orientation in terms of as far as their political orientation goes, they might, and they have a direction wherein they want to take this country or any country for that matter towards a particular kind of a direction in due course of time. They have decided a course for themselves, they are aligning with a different kind of a perspective with the global forces, then they might like organizations to behave in a similar kind of a manner and to align with themselves and so on. An example is energy policy, which is very important, which clearly affects energy producers and heavy users of energy more than other types of businesses, and in several forms actually. Economic conditions include the general economic climate and specific factors such as interest rates, exchange rates, inflation rate, the unemployment rate, the rate of economic growth, savings rate, etc. The levels of taxes, the quantum of taxes and several other things, they are overwhelming in case of many cases when we talk of businesses coming to India, or let us say going abroad and in different countries and so on. And general economic conditions also, if somehow for example India is shining, India is rising, Indian average income is rising, basically we are coming out of poverty, basically large population has come out of poverty in past few decades. So, if that is the case, then somehow our buying capacity is increasing, and if our buying capacity is increasing, then definitely we will be going for a very different kind of a direction in terms of purchasing the products at our desire and so on, and we all understand this. Socio-cultural forces. Socio-cultural forces include the societal values. Now, this is very important basically. However adaptive we are, in terms of changing our apparels or food habits. For example, we easily adapted fast food in this country, but that did not mean that we would leave the traditional food which we have been consuming. And do you think that McDonald's noticed that when they went for aloo tikki burger? Do you think, and this is just a product strategy, but it is a strategic consideration as well. Do you think that when KFC actually went completely veg in some of the areas, so societal values, attitudes, cultural influences, precisely, Holi is coming a couple of days from now, on Monday, this is today it's Friday 22nd of March when I am recording this for you, and 25th of March is the Holi of 2024. So, whole of the country is aligned towards as far as this Holi celebration goes, and these are cultural aspects which organizations they do consider, and lifestyles that impact demand for particular goods and services, as well as demographic factors such as the population size, growth rate and age distribution. You see, lifestyles, they are playing a very prominent role as far as Indian situation goes, and India became a large producer for all of this world, but India has become the largest market for all of this world because Indians are adapting global lifestyle as of now, and that has become remarkable in terms of gaining the attention of all the major organizations, starting from Nike to Levi Strauss, or to several kinds of apparel manufacturers and food producers and so on, and packaged food producers and so on. So that is how things are. Socio-cultural forces vary by locale and change over time. An example is the trend towards healthier lifestyles. We were healthy long back, we lost on that account in due course of time, it is just on the lighter side, and now we are focusing upon more healthier lifestyle, and including so many things: health supplements, gyms, exercise avenues, lifestyle patterns which organizations are guiding us. We are even using apps to support that, which can shift spending toward exercise equipment and health clubs, as the lines and the authors also say. Technological factors. Technological factors include the pace of technological change and technical developments that have the potential for wide ranging effect on society, such as genetic engineering, nanotechnology, solar energy technology and so on. Technological change can encourage the birth of new industries such as the connected wearable devices and disrupt others such as the recording industry and so on. And recording industry, we are closely connected to when we are recording this course for you. The other day I was talking to some of my BTech students, and we were talking in relation to some of the projects which have been done by them, and few of the projects were purely related to virtual reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, and virtual reality devices are now the point of concentration with reference to doing so many things, including the tourism related experience. One very interesting thing which was talked about in terms of how to release stress, one was in relation to health, and you see VR AR is a component which has become the part of our thought process in due course of time. That is a major technological change which is bringing us to a thought that how it can be utilized for getting connected to whole of this world while sitting at one single kind of a place. Environmental forces, these include ecological and environmental forces such as weather, climate change and associated factors like water shortages. These factors can directly impact industries such as insurance, farming, energy production and tourism. They may have an indirect but substantial effect on other industries such as transportation and utilities. We have talked about that at length, and I would again refer and I would request you to think about Gangaji. Visit a website called gangapedia.in and you would realize what I am talking about. Legal and regulatory factors. These factors include the regulations and laws with which companies must comply, such as consumer laws, labor laws, antitrust laws and occupational health and safety regulation. And today we are actually moving into a phase wherein India would soon be implementing laws associated with social media, how social media must be accountable for few things which which those platforms have not been accountable for up till now. Government has been focused, they have focused approach on that, and that would be the betterment for all in due course of time. There are several repercussions which we have been facing, and everyone has been facing. Companies also know, but they can't do much about it until there is a regulatory framework around that, and government has taken a proactive approach nowadays, and it's about to come as far as the situation goes. And this PESTLE framework represents the broader external environment in which business operates, influencing its strategies and performance. It identifies how various macro environmental factors may affect an organization and its competitive advantage. Just to give you a clue, that when the social media associated laws would be enforced, then there would be several kinds of changes in the content, in the approach of the organizations, in their systems which they are internally pursuing in terms of monitoring that content, in terms of data security, data safety, data privacy, in terms of several other things which would which would be coming into force, and then customers would also be benefited. Then customers and people would be made aware in those kind of terms. Software would be augmented, the apps would be augmented, and the scope for the apps would be augmented, the usage pattern would be augmented, and so many things would come to a different kind of a level and platform. So many technical experts and legal experts would come into the fray, and probably the way we are using social media would completely change in due course of time. Can we use social media for education? I am thinking nowadays on this kind of a subject, how effectively we can use social media for structured education. Let us see what happens. But the question remains, and the question is, how do you analyze the competitive intensity of your industry? How competitive you are. So, how do you analyze this intensity? Let us see. When you say that how do you analyze the competitive intensity of your industry, that actually implies that one of the most popular tool for analyzing, and this is justified through that tool, but that implies that it has to be done in a structured kind of a manner. So, one of the most popular tool for analyzing the competitive dynamics of an industry is Porter's 5 forces. Michael Porter, a professor with Harvard Business School, he proposed this model which is well adapted around the world, which is very logical and relevant, and especially relevant to this discussion, structuring ourselves in alignment to the environmental forces. So, it is widely used because it provides a structured approach to understanding the broad environment in which a company operates, helping businesses make informed strategic decisions. And we are referring to specific strategic steps over here. Let us see what Michael Porter has to say. And again we are using Kellett, Thompson, Strickland and Gamble. So, the character and strength of competitive forces operating in an industry are never the same from one industry to another, as the authors talk about in terms of Porter's 5 forces. And they say that this can be different for different industries, the character and strength of competitive forces. The most powerful and widely used tool for diagnosing the principal competitive pressures in a market is the 5 forces framework, which you would see in just a while from now. Competitive pressures of companies within an industry come from 5 forces. They are interrelated forces, and Porter has called those 5 forces. These include competition from your rival sellers, 1-to-1 fight, Coke and Pepsi, Pampers and Huggies, X against Y. Competition from potential new entrants to the industry, definitely newer companies, they are looking for entering into similar kind of a business which definitely looks profitable, and the business holds potential, the market is growing and the want is not being fulfilled by the existing players and so on. So, there is a scope and people are entering into that, but when people are entering into that would be a threat to the existing producers, and they might be curtailing down their profits and gains, and we will see. Competition from producers of substitute products, closely related substitutes, which may be similar but not the same. And we have talked about substitutes and alternatives, but here I wish to mention that this implies closely related substitution. Alternatives can be fulfilling the need through some different kind of a product, alternative to the existing product, but here this implies closely related kind of a product. Supplier bargaining power. For example, a farmer grows something, supplies to someone, and if he finds benefit in growing some other product, basically the same land can be used for growing something else which he would supply to others. For example, coffee farmer can change the farm orientation and become a mango farmer someday, which is happening, but then this would affect the coffee producers in due course of time. Customer bargaining power, which is the biggest element to me sometimes basically, and if customer is looking into substitutions, and customer if at all looks into alternatives, which is not actually the point of concentration in Porter's 5 forces, but if customer looks at alternatives. For example, virtual reality becomes the reason for customers not going so often to for real tourism. That would be very different kind of a situation. Customer might be extensively selective in going to a very specific kind of a place after the customer has visited virtually almost all the places. Customer might lose that sheen someday, that these places actually had to be explored, but may not find those places worth exploring and would be very selective. This might channelize, we may argue that it might not hamper the number of tourists per place, but definitely it might affect the business somehow. Is tourist industry actually looking into virtual reality based tourism as of now? Let us see what happens. So, this is the Porter's 5 forces model in front of you, wherein the centermost point is rivalry among competitive sellers. I would be talking about that briefly and deciphering that, as Porter has done and authors have suggested. This figure or this chart is the readaptation, has been redeveloped and reconstituted, taken from the book. There is no plagiarism associated with that. We have not exactly copied it from there, although the chart is same. So, there is a disclaimer that there is no plagiarism associated with that. So, competitive pressures coming from other firms in the industry, same industry, for example, cement to cement, soft drink to soft drink, similar kinds of soft drinks, cola to cola, and several, you know better, same rival sellers. Now, this element is associated with competitive pressures coming from the producers of substitute products. There is someone who has a closely related substitution kind of, and then from potential new entrants from the other side. Then there are two other sides associated, one with suppliers, that is competitive pressures stemming from supplier bargaining power. I may not supply to you, and your whole business depends upon, or some part of your business depends upon my supplies as well. So, competitive pressures stemming from buyer bargaining power, as far as this situation goes. Now, if competitive pressure is coming from buyer bargaining power, that may come because of substitution as well, that may come because of different kind of raise of income as well, that may come from as far as buyer finding alternatives as well, that may come from several kinds of reasons, that may come from further awareness and education of buyer and so on, and association of buyer with the environment as well, if buyer stops purchasing large number of automotives and so on. Using the 5 forces model to determine the nature and strength of competitive pressures in a given industry involves 3 steps. Step 1, for each of the 5 forces, identify different parties involved along with specific factors that bring about competitive pressures, which may put up competitive pressure on you basically. Evaluate how strong the pressures stemming from each of the 5 forces are, strong, moderate or weak. Now, this is a potential analysis, how it would be affecting your business in due course of time. That is what you have to do. Otherwise, how would you scale strong, moderate and weak basically? Direct effect can be gauged in terms of sales or in terms of costs which you may bear, but definitely it has to be seen with the perspective of a foreseen situation. Determine whether the 5 forces overall are supportive of high industry profitability or not, how whole of the industry is being supported. So, one, if industry is growing because of the 5 forces, that is customer is towards that industry, then you may think in terms of focusing upon your role or attracting more customers towards you, as simple as that. And you see, now I will be quickly taking you towards the elements which authors have talked about in terms of the 5 forces. So, competitive pressures created by rivalry among competitive sellers, and the strongest of the 5 competitive forces is often as the rivalry for buyer patronage amongst competing sellers of the product or service. The intensity of rivalry among competing sellers within an industry depends on the number of identifiable factors. Rivalry increases and becomes a stronger force when there are 2 conditions. Buyer demand is growing slowly. They are not so intensely going for repeated purchase, or number of buyers are not getting added now and then towards this kind of a thing. Buyer costs to switch brands are low. They may be complementary conditions and they may be kind of opposite conditions or are not working in harmony with each other. Both the things can exist. For example, there was a time when people were slowly purchasing computers or mobile phones, And today when a buyer actually switches off from one service provider of a mobile company to other service provider, there is no cost involved. And rivalry increases and becomes a stronger force when the products of the industry members are commodities or else weakly differentiated. Salt, cement, so many things are there. The firms in the industry have excess production capacity or inventory. You have created a huge production systems like automotives, and those kind of things are there. The firms in the industry have high fixed cost and high storage cost. Competitors are numerous or are of roughly equal size and competitive strength. They are large players in the industry. Rivals have diverse objectives, strategies and countries of origin. Rivals have emotional stakes in the business or face high exit barriers. They don't want to get out of the business which they have been pursuing for quite a number of years. Rivalry decreases and becomes a weaker force under the opposite conditions. Now entry of threats, the threat of entry of new entrants, basically factors affecting the threat of entry of new players basically. So, a threat of entry is a stronger force when incumbents are unlikely to make retaliatory moves against new entrants and entry barriers are low. Entry barriers are high and threat of entry is low when incumbents have large cost advantage over potential entrants due to high economies of scale. You have scaled up so much so that if a new player has to come, the whole economics has to be met in terms of your scale as well as the kind of maturity the industry has already achieved. Significant experience based cost advantages or learning curve effects, the existing players are more learned and they have more resources at their disposal and they know how to do this business. Other cost advantages, example favorable access to inputs, technology, location or low fixed costs. Customers have strong brand preferences and or loyalty to incumbent sellers. For example, if you are going to fight with Nike, you have to think about all these kind of things. There are strong network effects, capital requirements are high, there is limited new access to distribution channels and shelf space, government policies are restrictive, you have to go for a retail chain for example as good as Walmart. There are restrictive trade policies, patents and other forms of intellectual property protection are in place. For example, you want to become another Apple, you want to become another company which is doing exceptionally well as far as their space goes, they have lots of IPs with them. Factors affecting competition from substitute products. Competitive pressures from substitute products are stronger when good substitutes are readily available and attractively priced. Substitutes have comparable or better performance features. Buyers have low costs in switching to substitutes. Competitive pressures from substitutes are weaker under the opposite conditions. And signs that competition from substitutes is strong is associated with that sales of substitutes are growing faster than sales of the industry being analyzed. Producers of substitutes are moving to add new capacity and profits of producers of substitutes are on the rise. Whenever you are changing a product, this applies to you and the reasons associated with this are associated with your choice, as simple as that. Factors affecting the bargaining power of suppliers. It is strong when suppliers' products or services are in short supply, are differentiated, industry members incur high costs in switching their purchases to alternative suppliers. The supplier industry is more concentrated than the industry it sells to and is dominated by a few large companies. Few are producing carbon black for that matter. Few are producing semiconductors for that matter, and you understand what I am talking about. Industry members do not have the potential to integrate backward in order to self manufacture their own inputs. Many automotive manufacturers, many construction companies, many other manufacturers, they may not go back and produce everything for themselves. Suppliers' products do not account for more than a small fraction of the total cost of the industry's products. There are no good substitutes for what the suppliers provide. Industry members do not account for a big fraction of suppliers' sales. That is how the supplier bargaining power is weaker under the opposite conditions as such, when we are talking of weaker power and stronger power. And this is how the five forces they work. Just look back at the discussion we have just had in terms of enumerating the factors, the role of those factors, in association of those factors being deciphered in terms of being forces for a company in an industry, and the whole picture would come in front of you, suggesting that while moving ahead in terms of our strategic steps, we have to take all the factors into consideration according to the pressure or the force they might generate on us. I will be coming back to you with my next segment in connection to the same environment and strategy, where I would try to decipher how to think about this. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.